Revenge films.
My name is Helen. I live together with my husband, Tony. My mother-in-law lives in the countryside, in the house that is under my husband's name. During the New Year and other important holidays, Tony and I always went to visit my mother-in-law. We live in a city that takes about 2 hours by high-speed rail from my husband's mother's house. So we can't visit my mother-in-law as much as we should. But my husband and I made sure that we visited her at least twice a year. However, my mother-in-law wasn't satisfied with that alone. Every time Tony and I visit her for the holidays, she always tells us to live together with her. And there are times when she calls me just to complain. It is impossible for my husband and I to move to the countryside and live together with my mother-in-law because of work. But despite telling her that, she keeps on insisting that we move in with her. Tony and I were perplexed about what to do with the situation. Knowing that I am a housewife, my mother-in-law used that reason to call me in the middle of the day while I was busy doing chores.
Hello, Helen? Have you decided yet on when you and Tony are going to move in? I need the two of you to move in with me.
I told you, Mrs. Miller, your son and I can't move into your house. I already explained to you millions of times why we can't do that. How many times do I have to tell you?
You're still saying that? Living together with me is non-negotiable.
Tony's work is in the city, so we can't live in the countryside. Impossible is impossible. That's it.
You stubborn bullhead! This house belongs to my son, so of course he should be living here. Why doesn't he just transfer and work here instead? He has plenty of job choices here too.
But even if you tell me that, there's nothing I can do about it.
I don't care. Stop making excuses and hurry up and pack your stuff. You and Tony will be living with me in this house, understood? I'm gonna tell my son just that.
My mother-in-law doesn't get tired of calling me again and again, just to yell on the phone about the same topic over and over. There's only so much I can take so gradually. It became unbearable for me. My husband was worried about me in that state, so whenever my mother-in-law called me about moving in together, I told my husband everything his mother said to me.
I'm home!
How was your day? Tony, I need to tell you this. Your mother called me again today.
Did she talk about wanting us living together with her again?
When I told her that we can't move to the countryside, she went furious and all hell went loose.
Again? I already told her that we won't be moving out of here anytime soon. I preached to her, but I guess she never understands.
Lately, I shudder every time the phone rings. She makes me so afraid of her, and I always worry.
You do? I'm sorry for what my mother has done. I'll call her later and explain to her again. This time, I'll make sure she never talks about moving in together again.
Really? Thank you, Tony. Every time my mother-in-law called to talk about moving in together, my husband scolded his mother, but it was totally ineffective. Instead of reflecting and repenting on her actions, her annoyance escalated to the point that even Tony couldn't take it anymore, too. Then, one day, my mother-in-law called me again. My husband told me that I should just ignore his mother's calls, so I decided to not pick up the phone. When I ignored my mother-in-law's calls, she started sending messages demanding that I pick up the phone. I had no choice but to answer her call. So I picked up my phone, and this is what my mother-in-law started talking about living together again.
My neighbor's son quit his job in the city and came back to the countryside to live together with his parents. You and Tony should quit your jobs and come back here.
I already told you this is impossible because our livelihood is in the city.
Until when are you thinking of continuing to make me live alone? I've had enough of you saying no to moving in with me.
Enough is enough. I've had enough of you demanding that we live with you. Oh, give me a break. Why don't you understand? When I yelled at her and strongly gave my point, my mother-in-law went crazy, and now she calls me more than 100 times a day. A whole lot more than before. My husband suggested that I block my mother-in-law for a while. It's been peaceful for a while, and that felt great. But then my husband's phone started ringing.
Hello? Helen blocked my number, didn't she? Tell her to unblock me immediately.
I'm the one who told her to block your phone number because you're too persistent.
I've had enough. I'm living in this house, even though I don't want to. I'm doing this for you, so send me money. If you don't want to do that, clean the house at least once a week since this is your house. And while you're at it, throw away all the things that I don't need.
My husband and I finally have had enough of my mother-in-law's behavior. So Tony and I decided to go to his mother's house the next weekend to clean the house up, just as she requested us to do. Tony decided to cut ties with his mother, and he had a plan on what to do before that. So I decided to join him as revenge for how she treated me all this time. We then went ahead and executed the plan. The moment we arrived at my mother-in-law's house, she was sarcastic to us right away.
How dare you come here after making fun of me?
Well, sorry we asked you to live in a house where you don't even want to live. Tony and I will throw away all the things that you don't need.
While Helen and I are cleaning the house, how about you go eat out and relax?
When my husband gave his mother a wad of cash to spend, she suddenly became in a good mood, and she happily went out to enjoy her day. Right after my mother-in-law went out, my husband and I immediately started cleaning the filthy house that has never been cleaned for years. We decided to pack all the things my mother-in-law didn't need and threw them all away, except for the things inside the small safe. Even the things that seemed like she might use, we threw them away when we decided that those things were probably just in the way. 2 hours later, the house was spick and span. Lastly, my husband changed the door lock, feeling refreshed after doing all that heavy work. We hid my mother-in-law's small safe under a bush in the garden. As for the other boxes, we stacked them up in the garage, and we pinned the letter we prepared earlier on the front door of the house. We are very sorry for making you live in this house, even though you didn't want to live here. We threw away all the things you don't need anymore, as requested. As for your valuables inside the safe, we hid them under a bush in the garden. Thank you very much for living in this house, despite not wanting to live here. Please, feel free to live wherever you want from now on. When my mother-in-law arrived home and read the letter we pinned on the front door, my husband and I already arrived at our house. My mother-in-law went mad and called my husband, but Tony just told her the same things we wrote in the letter. Then he blocked her phone number. He also blocked her account on the messaging app. My mother-in-law ran out of ways to deal with the situation. Without the keys to get inside the house, she has nowhere to stay for the night, or even to live in. Because of that, she had no choice but to sleep outside for a while. Once the heat was off, my husband and I decided to sell the house. We called the different companies and asked them to stop the water, gas, and electricity inside that house. So even if my mother-in-law happened to be able to get inside the house, it would be inhabitable for her. We thought that my mother-in-law would probably not come to our house because she'll have to ride a high-speed rail to come here. After that, my husband and I raised our glasses for a toast for the success of our genius plan. A few days later, my mother-in-law was somehow able to move into an apartment, but she can't call me whenever she gets bored anymore, so she ended up experiencing loneliness. Then, one day, a month later, my mother-in-law couldn't stand living in an apartment, a living situation that she is not used to. To our shock, she came to our house in the city. My mother-in-law pressed the doorbell again and again. She was also shouting very loudly while doing so.
I know you're inside. Open the door. It's useless pretending that you're not home. I know you're in there. I'm not going anywhere until you open the door.
My husband was at work during that time, but I was scared, so I called him and reported to him that his mother is right outside our house and is yelling. So he explained the situation to his boss and requested an early leave. He got permission from his boss and came home as fast as he could to rescue me. While I was waiting for my husband to arrive, my mother-in-law was yelling so loudly that she was being a nuisance to the whole neighborhood.
Give me my house back. Who told you that you can sell it? Give me back all the things that you threw away.
My body was shaking and I couldn't bring myself to stand still because of my mother-in-law's loud and scary shouting right outside the house. Then, my husband finally arrived to rescue me from his crazy mother.
Hey, what are you doing here?
You finally showed up. You are a good-for-nothing son. How dare you trick me? I'm your mother.
I will call the cops if you keep misbehaving and making a scene. Get out of here already!
Furious, my husband forced his mother home. However, my mother-in-law didn't go back to her apartment. Instead, she stayed at a hotel near our house. She followed us around for a while. Since my husband was worried about me, when he was at work and I was alone in the house, he immediately decided to sell our house. Then, with the money he got from selling the house, he bought a condominium with proper security. We then moved out of that house and we moved into our new condo as fast as possible. We were thinking of buying a condominium since we decided to sell our house, So we already had a couple of condos in mind that we were interested in living in. That is why we were able to move into our new abode without a hitch. As for my mother-in-law, she went back to her apartment after realizing that we were no longer living in our previous house. My husband and I were finally able to cut ties with my mother-in-law, and we were finally able to live a peaceful life together without that crazy woman. We have no idea where my mother-in-law is now or what she's doing. She hated being alone and being lonely that much, but she is now living an even more lonely life. As for my husband and I, we are finally free from the shackles of that persistent woman. We are now living a very comfortable life in our new abode, living a happily ever after. The end.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.